Papago Park, situated on the border of Phoenix and Tempe, is one of Arizona's treasures. It features spectacular views of both cities, the Phoenix Zoo, as well as the natural desert landscape. It's a popular hiking spot for residents, allowing visitors to walk among the native plants and surroundings. Nestled on one of the highest points in the park is the final resting place of a man who was not a native of Arizona, but still managed to blaze a trail of his own that began in our state's infancy. Governor George Hunt's presence is still being felt today at the state capitol, in more ways than one.
This actually is the historic governor's office. From 1901 until 1974, the governors of Arizona used this room. It's changed greatly over time.
Alice Duckworth is an outreach coordinator with the Arizona State Capitol Museum, which has restored Governor Hunt's office to the way it may have looked when he led the state in the early 1900s, complete with the governor himself.
My understanding is that he was one of the first things that got done back in around 1980, 1981.
George Wiley Paul Hunt was born in Huntsville, Missouri on November 1, 1859. Huntsville was named after George's grandfather, Daniel. George Hunt lived in Huntsville until 1878, when he set out on his own, ending up in Globe, Arizona in the early 1880s, looking for work.
Over time, he'd worked as a cowboy, but he was a bit of a heavy guy, so that didn't work out really well. Miner, once again, didn't pan out. And he was a dishwasher, he was a waiter, but when he got to Globe, he got a job at the Old Dominion Commercial Company. And that's like working for the company store. He was good clerk. He knew what you wanted before you did. And so he worked his way up to being president of the company.
It was that type of drive and way of connecting to people that would serve him later in politics. George Hunt's first elected position was mayor of Globe. He later moved on to the territorial legislature.
And he was twice president of the Territorial Council. And so when the U.S. Congress passed the Enabling Act in 1910, he was one of the men elected to write our Constitution. And being well known, he ended up being the president of the Arizona State Constitution Convention of 1910.
George Hunt became the first governor of the new state of Arizona on Valentine's Day, 1912.
George Hunt was a Democrat. He was a labor man. He supported the unions. He supported women's rights. Women's minimum wage law was passed, and he signed it in 1923. Right after statehood, an initiative petition was passed around through the men of Arizona, put on the ballot, and the men of Arizona voted overwhelmingly in favor of women's suffrage. Arizona became the 8th state to recognize women's rights, especially the right to vote and serve in office.
It was the gubernatorial election of 1916, however, which caused quite a bit of controversy.
Democrat George Hunt was running against Republican Thomas Campbell. And when the Secretary of State's office did the count, it came out with Campbell ahead. And so he was announced as the new governor of Arizona. George Hunt and the Democrats were going, no way, this cannot be. And so Hunt refused to leave his office. It was taken before the courts, but before the counting and recounting was going on, Hunt was given a notice to vacate. He was literally, told to get out of the building, which he did do because he was a law-abiding man. But it took just under a year, taking it all the way up through the courts to the Arizona Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court finished their count, they found Hunt ahead.
Including the 1916 election, George Hunt was selected as governor a total of 7 times. Not bad for the guy with a funny nickname.
George Hunt was the old walrus, partially because of the mustache, and partially because, somebody described him as looking more like a cross between a pumpkin and a gourd than anything else. He was kind of a soft fellow.
Hunt decided not to run for re-election in 1918. And in 1920, he was appointed Minister to Siam by President Woodrow Wilson. After Wilson lost the next presidential race, Hunt was replaced as minister and returned to Arizona. And you guessed it, he made another run at the governor's seat in 1922 against his old rival, Thomas Campbell. Hunt won by a wider margin this time, and would go on to serve as governor until the election of 1928. 2 years later, he won again, making him one of the most elected governors in the U.S. George Hunt passed away on Christmas Eve, 1934. He was interred in the White Pyramid Tomb at Papago Park. Arizona has gone through many changes since Hunt's death. With a population of around 6 million, it's become a desired location for many, which is something the old walrus could be proud of.